take another look. Take the next slide. And the next. There you go. There it is. Anybody ever feel like that? Losing control to find it. Have you ever just lost it? You know what I'm talking about? Like, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods in the room. You know, we say this about people. She lost it. He lost it. We were just talking, and then he lost it. What is it we keep losing? I want to talk a bit about this whole experience of losing it. And maybe just to explore for a minute today the positive side to losing it. Maybe we need to lose it. Sometimes we just need to lose it. Why? Because we're probably going to do it anyway. At some point in our lives, don't we all kind of find ourselves kind of all backed up, feeling lots of stuff? It's kind of like holding a beach ball underwater, feeling all this stuff, and then one day, completely out of control, we go to scratch our nose, and whoosh, here comes all of this feeling and stuff. You ever had that happen to you where you've just had it overwhelm you with all these feelings? It's dangerous. Sometimes people have this happen and they do very violent things, very bad things. We do have to kind of learn to manage these experiences of these emotions that we've got in ways that are more healthy. Look at all the people in our prisons today. A lot of the people in our prisons did something very bad. They did something that really harmed people. They did something that hurt people very badly. But you can look at their lives and begin to recognize that a lot of those people that are in those prisons did what they did because they lost it. A lot of those people are there because of the way they had learned or been shaped by their life to manage their emotional experience. Regulating our emotional experience is not something that all of us get taught so well. I don't know about you, but I grew up in a family that taught me to regulate some of my emotional experience by saying, just don't do it. And how's that working for you, as someone else famously seems to have said? Somehow, keeping a lid on everything that I feel seems to be more dangerous than letting myself have these feelings sometimes. And yet, we find ourselves in a world where sometimes you get ahead in a world where emotion is more denied than allowed. Maybe it's a leftover from our inheritance of culture, that acknowledging some of the weak feelings like distress or fear or embarrassment are things that if you show those, you're not as likely to become the CEO or the pilot of the airplane. Really, you don't want to get on an airplane and hear the captain get on the speaker and say, we're flying at 30,000 feet. And I'm kind of having a bad day. It's not comforting. We would really prefer to get on an airplane with somebody who seems to have managed their emotional experience a little more than that. But if you look at the flight safety record, a lot of the issues with crashes have to do with pilot error, and a lot of the pilot error have to do with what? Fatigue. And what is it that emotionally tells me I should get some rest? Fatigue triggers distress. Look at any infant. You ever, soon you people will be out shopping in malls to get ready for Christmas, right? And some of us will have these little strollers with little children in them. And after about 2 hours of strolling around the mall, what does an infant typically do? Cry. Exactly, they lose it. Good choice. And why did they begin to cry? Because fatigue naturally triggers in human beings' bodies that feeling of distress. So we begin to cry. But if you were raised in a way like I was that said, big boys don't cry, you look weak. You will be a wimp. Then you learn in a culture that frames manhood that way, and that often only rewards women who fit into that script. You learn to stuff it. Stuff it. And when you stuff it, you're basically kind of dissociating from your body. What happens when we lose it? It comes out much bigger. But more importantly, not connecting to what is the natural signal in my body that tells me I'm fatigued means I can blow right past those signals and get right back in the cockpit. None of us ever do this, do we? Ignore our fatigue and just keep on doing stuff. Now, of course, sometimes it's really helpful. When Sylvan Tompkins did some research on the difference between men and women and the polarity of our differences in this culture, he began to recognize that there were emotional scripts that men were given and those that women were given. And so often women were shaped to be okay to cry and to feel fear and to feel embarrassed. And men were shaped by the culture to ignore their fear, ignore their distress, and never acknowledge their shame. Come on, women, can I get a witness? What this creates for women, often in relationships with men, is that they will do kind of like what, I've seen happen many, many times, where women will come in and they'll say, have you looked at the checkbook? We don't have enough money to pay the bills at the end of the month. What are we going to do? And men will feel triggered, but they will not be able to acknowledge that feeling, because to resonate with that feeling is to be what? Weak. I'm not being a good guy. I was raised to be a guy. A good guy doesn't do that, doesn't show that. And so the guy says something along the lines of, it's going to be fine. To which the woman, right? She now feels like, you're an idiot. You don't get it. And so women will amp up the feeling, won't you, right? So now you feel more distress, more fear, and you express it more. And now the guy, poor guy, he's dealing with totally irrational women. Right? Guys, can I get a witness? Yeah, right. This woman is now being totally irrational. She's getting way overblown about this whole thing. And I'm just saying it's going to be okay. I don't know why you're getting so upset. You're getting out of control. You're losing it. Control is a big piece of this. Control. We control these feelings. We control other people's feelings. We want to control what they're feeling. We want them to respond the same we do, respond the same way. And when they don't, that triggers all kinds of stuff for us. So we keep trying to control what we are and what we feel. We have an image of what we think we're supposed to be, and we carry it around. And when we don't fit into it, it triggers some bad stuff. Sometimes people are raised with scripts that are so controlled, so flat emotionally, that they have no skill at managing the kind of emotion that gets triggered when they have some kind of major failure in their life or some kind of major loss in their life. And in those moments, those scripts fail them and they lose it. But we're only talking right now about the bad feelings. And bad feelings are just the part of us that say, hey, pay attention, something bad is going on, something that doesn't feel good. You might want to pay attention. It's like a warning light on the dashboard, you know? Guys, when they see a woman, this is typically scripted men, when they see a woman having that light on the dashboard going off, will often assume that the light on the dashboard means they're going to crash. But for the woman, what this mainly means for most women is just, hey, these feelings are telling me I need to pay attention to something. It doesn't mean we're going to crash. But the man's like, oh no, this is going to be the rest of the night. You know, who was it, Dave Barry? I think somebody wrote the book about some of this, and they said that when women, you know, say to the man, I think we need to talk. For the woman, it's like, we need to talk about our relationship. It feels like a tune-up. But for men, they automatically begin to just recognize this is not a tune-up. We're going to take apart the engine, aren't we? You really mean we're going to break this down to the blocks? And so we have these different experiences of what it means for us to have our feelings. But when we only talk about negative feelings, when we only talk about the stuff that feels bad, we often miss what it is that we are really missing in life, which is joining with other people in the good feelings. I mentioned last week that I think a lot of times we find ourselves stuck trying to manage all the fires in life, and it's really easy to find yourself in a place where you've forgotten how to whirl around and fall down, where you've forgotten how to let go of control and let yourself experience the good stuff, the joy. There may be some reasons why we've been kind of trained in that way. I go back to Sylvan Tompkins, this really smart guy who wrote voluminously about our emotional scripting, died 20 years ago. In his work, at one point, he studied this polarization of our scripting, and he started asking this really interesting question. He started asking this question. It was, are these polarizations between male scripts and female scripts the same in all cultures? If I go to Europe or Japan, or I go to somewhere in Australia or South America, do men always have these kinds of scripts around their emotions, and women always have these kind of scripts? It's an interesting question. And you know what he found? Yes. Except in cultures that never had to have a warrior class. Now that's interesting. What's interesting about that is that only in cultures that never had to get a group of people to decide to be warriors are there a sense of no scripted differences. Women cry, and men feel their crying coming out too. Women express fear, and men would feel that fear too, rather than have this disconnect. In fact, he said, you know, in some of these kind of island cultures that have never had a need for a warrior class, you could see the men and the women going off into the jungle to pick berries and singing songs together. Which sounds great to women. And runs directly into our macho scripts. I don't pick berries. And I don't sing songs while I do it. What Tompkins finally ended up suggesting is that the control that we have put on our emotional experience, which often also involves good feelings as well, has evolved over thousands and thousands of years in cultures who needed to have a warrior class who agreed to taking on emotional scripts that would deny their distress, their fear, and their shame. That's what you want a warrior to do. You want a warrior to be able to not cry, not be afraid, and not feel shame. And, though those are natural to the body, to develop scripts to Really ignore those. But also, you want your warrior to delay enjoyment. So, the other part of this script is, I have scripts that say it's not okay for me to whirl around and fall down at any time, particularly right now. I can do that only when I have accomplished exactly what my task is and I am being rewarded for my valiant efforts to do things that required me to withhold and ignore my distress, my fear, and my shame. Then I can have a little enjoyment. What I'm suggesting this morning is that losing it can also be about finding your joy. And losing it, what is it, can really also be about letting myself experience the joy of this moment, which usually has to do with not taking for granted, like these flowers. Experiencing what is and letting myself into the joy of that in the here and now. Losing control of that feeling of joy. And it seems ever more true to me that we are living in a culture that's lost its joy. We've lost that sense that we can honestly and openly connect with each other in this freedom of play. You know, when they asked the Dalai Lama what he thought people should do to help make the world a more peaceful, loving place, you know what he said? He said, we should have more festivals. Because you can talk all you want about trying to put out the fires of hurt and pain and conflict and still not figure out how to let ourselves release ourselves into joy. When was the last time you whirled around and fell down? Doxia, I've always said, is our model for joy. That whole experience of letting ourselves let go of enough control, let go of enough of the concern of how is this going to look to somebody else. Letting ourselves be silly. Letting ourselves be foolish. Inviting that experience of play. Losing it. What we discover when we allow that to happen is we recover. We find something that without it, everything else gets a little darker. During this season, as the weather begins to change, we move in 11:11 to celebrating the part of our spiritual journey that's about letting go and emptying out. Letting go of those things that we tend to hold too tightly to. Maybe consider the possibility that holding too tight to your joy is something that you might let go of. That to discover that reconnection with heart and soul and spirit is as much about letting yourself be foolish, letting yourself be silly, letting yourself dance, letting go of appearances. And like the song we wrote this week says, where do you go to let go? I know you can't go do that at work, except for me.